at Town Square, and today the author of an open letter to conservatives. It was published a few weeks ago on Talking Points Memo. Russell King, the author, he says he has had it with Republican hypocrisy, hyperbole, history, revisionist history specifically, and hatred. I'm going to quote from the beginning of his letter. He says, "I grew up in a profoundly Republican home, so I can remember when you wore a very different face than the one we see now. You've lost me, and you've lost most of America. 4 out of 5 Americans do not identify as Republican. 2 out of 3, mind you, don't identify as a Democrat. He didn't say that, I did. Because I believe having responsible choices is important to democracy. I'd like to give you some advice and an invitation. First the invitation, come back to us. Now the advice. You're going to have to come up with a platform that isn't built on a foundation of cowardice, fear of people with colors, religions, cultures, and sex lives that differ from your own. Fear of reform in banking, healthcare, energy. Fantasy fears of America being transformed into an Islamic nation, into social fascism, into a disarmed populist put in internment camps, and more. But you have work to do even before you take on that task. Your party, the GOP, and the conservative end of the American political spectrum have become irresponsible and irrational. This call to the grand old party has now gone viral on the internet. More than this letter, which has link upon link, it's the most linked up thing I've ever read, accumulated double the number of hits of anything that had been posted on Talking Points Memo in its 10-year history of publishing both self-generated and user-generated content. Russell joins us today from Madison, Wisconsin. Russell, why did you write this?
Well, it seemed to be the thing to do at the time, Dylan. I was looking at the news and realized that the GOP that I was looking at didn't look anything like what I grew up with, what my dad was in, and it was bringing democracy to a halt in America, and we need the conservatives to come back and be a player in this game.
I suspect you and I, just from reading your letter, come from a very similar point of view when it comes to the role of government and nations, and see the value, huge value, as a conservative myself relative to the government when it comes to game rigging and all the rest of it, and dealing with systems. Why do you think that the conservative movement in this country that would hold to account the government on the basic principle of fairness has become what you describe, and what I agree with you, honestly, in your assessment, a party of hypocrisy, hatred, revisionist history, and hyperbole? How did that happen?
That's the big question, and I can't tell you. I know that you know, I grew up under Governors Romney and Milliken, and they didn't behave as the way Sarah Palin does, and Boehner and Cantor. They didn't speak that way. They were people of calm and reason, and even a passion for social justice, which now on the right is a dirty word. You write that you can't vote and scream against this. This is going back to your letter. You can't vote and scream against the stimulus package and then take credit for the good it's done in your own district. For instance, Republican Congressman Phil Gingrey, who called the stimulus a boondoggle and a dismal failure, then posed with a big check back in his district and claimed credit for all the good it did for his constituents. You write about hyperbole. You quote, "A little decorum, a little respect for our national institutions and the people and values they represent would be refreshing. Cut out the shouting, the swearing, and obscenities, as opposed to the display," and we have this here from the healthcare debate. Take a look at this.
"Those who are shouting out are out of order.
You talk about the rewriting of history. Again, this is all in your letter, and if you haven't read this letter, I truly recommend you give it a read, not just because of its content, but because you did such an incredible job of linking so that it is clear that this is not necessarily your point of view, per se, as it is an assemblage of reality, unfortunately. Then there's the rewriting of history, for instance, cutting a leading founding father out of the textbooks, like what the Texas Board of Education did when they removed Thomas Jefferson from the state curriculum. He was my favorite. I'm not sure how to take that. And then your final point about hatred, we talk about the language that was used. How would it be different? How would the legislation, for instance, the healthcare legislation or the banking debate or the energy debate that surely will come in the months ahead, the immigration debate, how would that be different if instead of the conservative party that we do have now, we had the conservative party that perhaps you and I wish we had to oppose so many of the special deals being made by the Democrats right now in their effort to pursue their agenda. How would it look different to you?
Well, it certainly would have been. It certainly would have been more bipartisan in an honest sense. A number of Republican ideas are included in Obama's proposal and now in the law. But it seems that the Republicans are loath to admit that part of their agenda and their ideas were included. It's a bipartisan law. It's something that Eisenhower and Nixon could easily have signed on to. We wouldn't have had a description of the passage of that law as Armageddon.
If you were to look at the future and look at the fact that 4 out of 5 Americans do not identify themselves as Republicans, that is an all-time low. With that said, 2 out of 3 Americans don't identify themselves as Democrats. The level of dissatisfaction with the political process, period, because of the obvious control special interests have over both parties, makes it difficult to trust any solution. Do you believe that we're in a position where we can actually see a reversal in this trend just with good information?
I wish I could say that were true. I don't think we're there yet. I think we need to have the national discussion ratchet down a couple of notches so that we're not talking about civil war and secession and things like that.
All right. Listen, Russell, a pleasure. Again, compliments on the letter. You can read the entire letter. We have the link on our website at dylan.msnbc.com.